All right, I will begin with a story. Back in seventh grade, when all my friends and I were getting cell phones and very much used to this whole texting thing, which was very cool and convenient. But then after maybe a couple weeks or so, we'd all gotten used to it. And then my English teacher at the time, Mrs. Riley, started to get on all of us students because our spelling and grammar had really fallen off. And this was kind of my first instance of having to deal between these two discourse communities of formal technological communication and informal technological communication. And so I plan to be able to recount my own experience of this continual navigation between these two, but also help everyone here be able to point out the goals, jargon, and values employed in each so as to better become, code switches yourself. So the first trick to balancing these two discourse communities is being able to identify the goals of each so as to be able to adhere to them appropriately. So in an informal technological communication context, you're dealing with simplicity or convenience, nothing too major. But in a formal technological communication community, you're looking for precision, trying to be specific or neat, and it's very academic in nature, and kind of where I find myself having to deal with both of these, at least if I'm on Facebook or texting or something, and then I get an email from one of my teachers and I'm having to reply here. I'm going from this shorthand, simple, convenient communication to a more strict to a more strict guidelines. Where I'm having to sound, very, very eloquent and articulate and things like that. But in both these instances, I'm trying to manage each discourse community appropriately. Where if informal, I'm looking for and all my friends want just simple, convenient things like that. But in a more formal context, I'm having to be very neat and precise and things like that. So while identifying and adhering to the goals of each community is easy, at least a little bit for me, the jargon is by far the most difficult that I deal with. In a simple, the simple jargon that's kind of associated with an informal technological communication community might be things like LOL, BTW or OMG, something like that. Whereas I'm more acquainted with just using simple slang, sup, dope, peace, anything like that, and I manage that fairly well. But I struggle with the emojis because I don't understand them as well. With a little like colon and backslash, I don't get those quite as well. It doesn't make as much sense. But probably by far the most difficult for me in the formal communication, the jargon that's thrown around, is dealing with formatting and MLA, APA, Chicago, Turabian. These are problems that I have to outsource. I have to go to maybe the writing center and have them help me out with it because I struggle with that the most, and I would advise everyone else to do that as well. It's the easiest way of being able to cope with the jargon associated with that discourse community. But to fully manage navigating between these two discourse communities, it becomes necessary to identify the values. You already know like the goals, but you want to know kind of what they like, things that they like, and so in an informal community, when I think of things that I like in like Facebook or Twitter, I like funny. On Twitter I'll be following different communities because in an informal context it's easy to be very funny, but you can't have this bleed over to a formal technological community. I have yet to see someone make jokes via Blackboard or in an essay or email or something like that because it's not suited to the discourse community. So but then for the values that a formal discourse community would hold would be more along the lines of being neat and sounding, articulate, really just kind of goes along with the goals in some sense, but being very fluent, eloquent, articulate, things like that. And then being able to identify what each group values allows me to adhere to that, as I said previously. But in conclusion, The ability to navigate between these two discourse communities relies on knowing the three things: the goals, jargon, and values associated with them. And for me, it was a tough lesson learned, in 7th grade. But since then, I have been able to navigate between these two discourse communities appropriately and manage them pretty well. And I hope that everyone here was able to learn from my experience and the main 3 points, so that everyone can become master code switchers between the two discourse communities of informal technological communication and formal technological communication. Thank you.